Hi again. In this video we're going to be taking a look at a truly incredible little fly known as the O'Keefe Special. It's a fly that you won't find in any fly book anywhere because it's a local fly. It was designed and developed here in Saskatchewan by a gentleman named Brian O'Keefe, and it's proven to be an extremely productive fly for pretty much any species of trout and small panfish like perch and even pickerel. Very simple fly to tie. The materials that you need will be some kind of hackle. This is a saddle hackle, ginger color. We'll be using the darker colors here from the middle of this particular one. For the body we use mohair, which is just a very loosely woven sort of wool fiber. The best color to use is no longer available, but a very, very close approximation is made by Mike and Dreesen, and it's called Canadian Brown Mohair. So it's a kind of a rusty brown color. Olive works as well, but this is the best color to try to choose. For a rib we'll be using just gold or copper colored fine wire, and the wing that goes off the back there is black bear fur. You can get away with using squirrel tail. It's got the same kind of stiffness to the fibers and basically the good enough length for it. And of course there is a collar around it that is also made out of the same hackle fibers that we have before. Typically this is tied in sizes maybe ranging from size 8 on the big side down to size 14 on the small end of the scale, and typically on a 3x long shank. Wet style nymph hook. So having said all that, let's see how we tie it. So I'm going to pop my size, in this case I'm going to show you on a size 10, like I said, 3x long mustad nymph hook. Nothing special in particular about this hook, it's just a normal run-of-the-mill hook. We'll start close to the back, lay down a little tag of thread. Try not to go very close to the bend of the hook, as we're going to be putting on some fibers, and if you go over the bend of the hook, those tail fibers will point down. We don't want that. We want the tail fibers to be coming out in the same line as the shank of the hook. So I'm going to come to my saddle here and choose a feather with some darker fibers on it that will serve as a tail. Oops, I managed to get two there. Put it aside. And all this white fluffy stuff at the bottom, it's just essentially garbage, so we'll just strip it off and get rid of it. Maybe just a tick more there. And what we want is a small cluster, 10, 12 fibers off the base, the longest fibers that we'll use as a tail. So we'll pull those off. The family just came home. Hello! And we're going to have those, not sort of 2/3 the length of the hook, give or take a bit. We'll switch our hands, we'll put them up to the hook, do a pinch, grab, come around. If you miss a few, don't worry, just get them on the second go and lay them down. Now I've got a few sticking out straight, as you can see. Don't want that, just get rid of them. That tail's a wee tick short, so before I go real tight, I'm just going to pull it out a bit longer and then secure them down with a few thread wraps going forward, and then come back to where I tied that in. Now this will need a rib, and so that will go on next. Take, I don't know, 3-4 inches, enough that you have a comfortable working length to use. Trim that off of your spool with the deep part of your scissors. Lay that against the near side of the hook to you. You want that to sort of run along. So we're going to put it in here, loose wrap, and what you'll see is that that wire will slowly come up to the side right beside you. Continue up to secure it down, and then go all the way back again to that same tie-in point. Okay, so now we've got the material for our ribbing. Now comes the body material. It's just this mohair. You'll need a piece that's, depending on what size of hook you have, 3 to 4 inches long. We'll lay it up there. This is very fibrous, so you might have loose fibers going all over the place. Do not worry about that a bit. That's part of how this fly looks. So we'll secure it, and then take our thread up towards the eye of the hook, but we'll stop a good solid eye's length behind the real eye of the hook. We always want to leave space at the front of our flies for tying in the materials that are at the front of the hook, as well as ahead. Okay, so I've got that in. Now I'm going to take the mohair and with just touching wraps cover the shank of the hook. Now this one is, the fibers are staying down fairly secure. If the fibers are going all over the place, don't worry, that's actually quite nice. So we're going to secure that with just a few turns behind, and then trim off any extra. Okay, and then we'll take our wire, and wrapping the opposite direction that we just put our mohair down, we'll wrap the wire in loose spirals going forward. Okay, so go under the hook, one right at the back, and then start your spirals going forward. And try to make them as even as you can. Once you get to the front, thread over 2, 3 times, take that last one, give it a tug to make it nice and secure, come down as close as you can, grip it, and helicopter it off. And now you've got it ribbed. Okay. For the wing that comes off the back, we are using black bear fur. So what we'll do is we'll just take a small clump of the fur, 10-15 fibers, something like that. Not very many, probably less than that. We'll trim them off close, and there will be under fur in here, and we don't want any of that. So we're going to go out with a nice little thing. We'll grip the tips of them just by sliding out until we have just the tips, and then we can pull out all that under fur. And do that just a few times to get it out. And what you'll end up with is actually quite a bit more sparse clump. And it's better to have this fly tied fairly sparsely. It seems to work much more effectively when there isn't as much of a wing and there isn't as much of a collar. So we now have our small clump. We want it to reach back approximately to where that tail ends. If it's not exactly in line, it's not going to kill anything. So we'll measure it up. We'll switch our hands, because that was about right. And then I'm just going to right now trim off this part that I won't be using. So I'm left with just a little tag there. I'll use that right at the hook as my tie-in point. Tie in a couple loosely. Now, as I tied that on, it started to wrap over. So I don't need that. I want it to be right on top of the hook, so I'll just twist it back. Remember, you're always in charge of the materials, not the other way around. Oh, and I didn't tie that in very well, so it slipped right out. Not a problem. We'll just re-secure it. Okay, and as you can see, that is not an overly dense wing. There's maybe 8 or 10 fibers there, and that's all you need. Okay, 90% done. What we need to do now is just tie on the collar. And that collar we can tie with that same piece of hackle where we peeled off a few fibers to make the tail. Okay, so what you're going to do is go to the very tip of the hackle feather and just grab it with one hand. So you have as few fibers as you can, and then slowly, the other hand, thumb and forefinger, pull them down so they splay out a little bit here. And what you're getting is sort of the fibers standing more vertically and perpendicular to the shaft of the feather. Okay. Now for this fly, we're actually going to tie it in by the thick end of the feather. So I'm just going to even the fibers up here a little bit. And as you can see, this feather does have a natural curl to it going this way. and I want that natural curl to be curling towards the back of the fly as well. So if I were to put it on this way and wrap, you can see that the curl's going to be going towards the front, which I don't want. So always make sure that you get that natural curve of the feather going in the direction you want, which is, in this case, towards the back. So I'm going to take this. It's got a very long stem on it right now, which is great. It's easier to work with. I'm going to put this right as close to where that bear hair is tied in. 2 gentle wraps around, and then I'm going to figure 8. I'm going to go around the hook and then back behind the hackle, that feather that's laying on there. And what that does is it makes the feather stand out perpendicular at 90 degrees to the hook shank, and that makes it much easier for when we want to wrap it around. Okay, it's not necessary, but it just helps. So there we go. We've got a few wraps. We'll take the thread forward. I like, just for security reasons, so if my thread moves around or falls, I like to put a little half hitch in there just to secure the thread. I'm going to take this long tag here, trim it nice and short before I start winding my hackle. Okay. Take a pair of hackle pliers if you want, and if you have, grab the tip of the feather, and all you need is 1, 2, depending on your feather, maybe 3 wraps. In this case, I'm going to put 3. I'll take my thread, come up behind that hackle, that last loop, trying not to catch any of the fibers that any of the wraps that I've just done. 3 turns around it. That will be secure. Tighten my thread a little bit. I'm going to lean this out just a little bit to give me a bit more visibility for where I want to snip, and snip it off. All I have to do now is make a little head and clean up the front of the hook. So I'm going to take with my thumb and forefinger, pinch the whole of that so that it's all pulled back and out of the way, and then take some thread wraps to make a nice, neat head. I'll finish it off with a whip finish, and you can see I managed to catch a fiber there. That is not an issue. I'll just get rid of it in a minute. So there's my whip finish to finish off the fly. Make sure it's good and secure. Just nick that off so that I'm not cutting any of the fibers on the collar. There's 1 or 2 that are kind of sticking out all over the place, so I'm just going to politely ask them to go away with my scissors. And then you finish it off with a drop of head cement of your choice. Dab there, and a dab there. Of course, if you manage to somehow get a little bit of the glue or head cement into the eye of your hook, you can take your bodkin, your little needle like this, and just clean it out. Okay, now I've used UV glue, so I'm just going to set it with my torch. And that's it. That's all it takes to tie an O'Keefe Special. If you've never heard of this fly before, you have now. And if you don't tie some up and put them into your box and fish with them, you're missing out, because this fly produces. Alright, thanks a lot for watching, and good luck with your tying.